My dear students, today we are going to discuss about chapter 13, Organisms and Populations. It is a continued part of previous classes what we have taken in live class MyPal app. Okay, in that classes we discussed about regulators, conformers, migrate, and with that of the adaptation. So the remaining part of adaptation what we are going to discuss today in our YouTube classes. Adaptation. In our previous classes we discussed the definition of adaptation. Adaptation is an attribute. So what is the meaning of attribute? A character. Adaptation is an attribute of the organism. Attribute of organism, morphologically, physiologically, and behavioral. They enable the organism to survive and reproduce in its habitat. It is any attribute. Any attribute is nothing but character. How it is going to adjust? By modifying itself morphologically. For example, phylloclade in our xerophytes we studied. The phylloclade means the stem is modified into a leaf-like structure to live and survive in the scarcity of water, that is in desert. So by modifying itself, it is reducing the rate of transpiration. That is the best example for morphology. And physiologically we studied that there is a development of sunken stomata, there is a development of thick cuticle, and to reduce the transpiration in xeric condition. And with that of a kangaroo rat is a xeric animal. Here physiologically it is adjusting to the existing environment condition by oxidation of fat and excreting concentrated urine. Okay. So this is how the adaptation is an attribute of any organism, morphologically, physiologically, and behavioral, that enables the organism to survive and reproduce in its habitat. So now we are going to start with adaptation in high altitude. A person moved to high altitude more than 3,500 meter. A person moved to high altitude more than 3,500 meter develop altitude sickness. A person when he moved to the high altitude more than 3,500 meters, it develops the altitude sickness. So the symptoms of altitude sickness are nausea, fatigue, heart palpitation. What is nausea? A term describes the feeling that you might omit. So when they reaches to the high altitude, for example, Rontage Pass of Monali and Manasa Sarovara. These are more than 3,500 meters. So when we move to that height, there is a development of altitude sickness. So in that nausea, when we are moving to the high altitude, we are getting the feeling vomiting sensation. Next is fatigue. Fatigue is nothing but extreme tiredness we are getting when we move to high altitude. And heart palpitation, feeling of fast heartbeat. Feeling of fast heartbeat. This all due to why it is happening when we move to high altitude. Because of low atmospheric pressure. It is happening because of low atmospheric pressure. Why? The body does not get enough oxygen. When we move to high altitude, there will be the low atmospheric pressure and body does not get enough oxygen in those regions, in that high altitude. Okay. Then how the human being adapted to that high altitude condition? Many peoples, they are living at high altitude. How they started living, how they adapted to survive and live in that high altitude condition. The body itself undergone adaptation. The body compensate low oxygen availability by increasing the red blood cells production. How the peoples who are living in high altitude adapted to that condition? By increasing the red blood cells production in the hemoglobin, increasing the red blood cell production. So that will compensate the low oxygen availability by increasing the red blood cells, those peoples who are living in high altitude. Okay. And the peoples who are living in high altitude, in their hemoglobin, decreasing the binding affinity of hemoglobin by increasing the breathing rate. In that area, the decreasing the binding affinity of hemoglobin, those peoples who are living in high altitude, they have the decreased binding affinity of hemoglobin by increasing the breathing rate. This is how the peoples who are there at a high altitude, they have these all adaptations. So the altitude sickness, the person move to high altitude, there is some symptoms will get, that we call it as altitude sickness. The symptoms symptoms developed by high altitude sickness are nausea, fatigue, heart palpitation. Why it is caused? Due to the low atmospheric pressure. Why? Because they are not getting enough oxygen. How are we going to compensate the low oxygen availability in that high altitude? By increasing the red blood cell production and decreasing the binding affinity of hemoglobin and increasing the breathing rate. This is how the organisms, the human beings, are adjusting to high altitude. And in due to some special adaptation in certain microbes, not only in human being, not only in the animals, in microbes also we are seeing the adaptation. Archaebacteria flourish in hot springs and deep sea hydrothermal vents. Might be you all having how these archaebacteria will flourish in hot springs and deep sea hydrothermal vents. Because the temperature exceeds more than 100 degrees Celsius. The temperature exceeds more than 100 degrees Celsius in those areas. How they going to compensate? By the development of special type of cell wall. By the development of special type of cell wall, these archaebacteria are surviving in that particular region. So the adaptation is the development of special type of cell wall. The cell wall of this archaebacteria is made up of glycerol with ether lipid. It is made up of glycerol with ether lipid. Normal bacteria cell wall is made up of glycerol, ester lipid. But archaebacterial cell wall is made up of glycerol and ether lipid. So the ether linked with the lipid. So this is how the adaptation we observed in microbes also. So many fishes in Antarctic water can survive at 0 degrees Celsius. Many fishes in Antarctic water can survive at 0 degrees Celsius temperature. Might be you have question, how in 0 degrees Celsius metabolic activity will be carried out? How they are alive in 0 degrees Celsius? For that all question there is an answer. They are adapted themselves by producing special type of antifreezers in their their blood. They are all adapted to adjust to that 0 degree Celsius by producing special type of antifreezers in their blood. This is important and neat bit, students, because in NCERT textbook they given many fishes in Antarctic water can survive at 0 degree Celsius temperature, but they didn't given the answer for this question. By producing special type of antifreezers in their blood, they are survived at 0 degree Celsius. Next is desert lizard bask in sun and absorb heat when their body temperature become low, and some species hide in burrows in the soil to hide and escape from above ground heat. When temperature decreases, the desert lizard come out from the burrows and bask itself to the sunlight. When temperature increases, the some species including desert lizard, they are going to hide themselves in the burrows. Why? Because they are showing the behavioral adaptation here. They are not showing the physiological, or they are not showing, these animals are not showing the physiological adaptation. Here these animals are showing the behavioral adaptation. So when temperature increases, they run into the burrows. When temperature decreases, they bask in the sunlight. This is an example for behavioral adaptation. So the adaptation concept, what we studied up to this is may ask in ask as a 3 marks question. See student, they may ask, give example, with example explain physiological adaptation, or with example explain morphological adaptation, with example explain the behavioral adaptation. Like these questions may come from this topic or a concept. So then we cleared with, or we can easily describe now what is an adaptation. We can easily define the what is an adaptation. Adaptation is an attribute of any organism, morphologically, physiologically, behavioral, can survive and reproduce in its habitat. Okay. Next, one more important concept, that is population. So, how can we define this population? A group of individuals living in well-defined geographical area which share or compete for similar resources and potentially interbreed. They can carry out the reproduction. Interbreeding means they carry out the process of reproduction. Group of individuals living in well-defined geographical area which share or compete for similar resources. They are competing for similar resources and potentially interbreed. So here in population we are talking about only the group of individuals or a group of similar species. Okay, so they are living in well-defined geographical area which share or compete for similar resources and potentially interbreed. The example for the population in textbook they have given the teak wood trees in the forest. Okay, in same habitat we are telling, no, living in well-defined geographical area. So here teak wood trees in a forest is an example for population. The cormorants in wetland. Cormorants means aquatic birds in the wetland. The group of individuals of aquatic birds in the wetland. And the bacteria in a cultural plate, the same species in a bacteria in a petri dish or a bacteria in a culture plate. And next is the lotus plants in a pond. Lotus plants in a pond. And the rats, a group of rats in a place. So these all we considered as an example for population. Next is population may be result of sexual or asexual reproduction. It might be asexual and asexual reproduction. So the population may increase or population may be result of sexual and asexual reproduction. Next is population ecology is important aspect of ecology which links ecology to population genetics and the evolution. So what is a population ecology then? Is a study of population in relation to environment, including environmental influence on density, distribution, age structure and population size. So, population ecology is the study of population in relation to environment, including environmental influence on density, distribution, age structure and population size. Then what is a population genetics? This population genetics is nothing but the study of genetic variation within a population, and it leads to the change in the frequency of gene and allele in a population over a space or a time. So the study of genetic variation within population, change in frequency of gene and alleles in a population over a space or a time. So this genetic variation leads to an evolution. So then what is an evolution? Is a change in the characteristic of species over several generations by the process of natural selection. So group of giraffes are living in well-defined geographical area. So population ecology means the population is interacting with the environment. Then due to the scarcity of the food for giraffe, it started showing the elongation of its neck. So that elongated neck leads to the formation of genetic variation in that species, and that genetic variation is transferred to the next generation, and the evolution has been created due to the natural selection. This is what the justifying the statement population ecology is important aspect of ecology which links ecology to population genetics and the evolution. Population attributes. Next concept is population attributes. What is a population? We already discussed in previous concept the population. Population is the group of individuals of same species living in well-defined geographical area and competing for similar resources, and they can interbreed freely and produce fertile offsprings. That is what we call it as a population. So, the population attributes means it describes the characteristics of the population. Attribute is nothing but a characteristic of a population. So, here we are going to study about the same species. What all condition is there in that particular geographical area, that we are going to discuss in population attributes with the characteristics of a population. So the population attributes consist birth rate, or it is also called as natality. Next is death rate, or it also called as mortality. And third, age pyramid. Fourth, sex ratio. Fifth, variation, population density and population size. These all are the characteristics of population. So population attributes are birth rate or natality, death rate or mortality, sex ratio, age pyramid, population size, population density and variation. These all are the population attributes. The first population attribute is birth rate or natality. The number of birth in the population in a given period of time is called as a natality or birth rate. Natality denoted by capital letter B. Natality is denoted by capital letter B. Okay. So, natality is denoted by capital letter B. So, birth rate or natality, number of birth in the population in a given period of time is nothing but a natality or birth rate. The example is given how we going to calculate the same species population in a given area. In a given area. Here, in this example, we have taken a pond. We have taken a pond where the same species of lotus are existing. The number of lotus plant in a pond last year. So, the number of lotus plants in a pond last year is 20. The number of new lotus plants added by reproduction in same pond is 8. Then, total number of lotus plant in a pond is 28. Birth rate can be calculated as the number of new plants divided by number of lotus plants in last year. So, the number of lotus plants in last year is 20 and the number of new plants is 8. So, birth rate can be calculated as 8 divided by 20. So, birth rate is equals to 0.4. So, is that clear all of you? So, birth rate or a natality is nothing but the number of birth in a population in a given period of time. How many birth has been taken place in a given period of time in a given geographical area. So, here the pond they taken as an example. In a pond last year how many lotus plants were there? 20. In that pond last year in 2019 the lotus plants in that pond is 20 and the number of new plants added, the number of new lotus plants added in 2020 is 8. Then we can calculate by dividing the number of new plants divided by number of lotus plant in last year. That is 8 divided by 20. The birth rate will be 0.4 individuals per lotus per year. So, new plants per lotus 0.4 new plants are developed by the single lotus, individual per lotus per year. So, one lotus plant is giving birth to or giving new plant, that is 0.4 individual per lotus per year. There is a development of new plant. Okay. Next is the death rate or mortality. Death rate or mortality. The number of death in a population, in a given period of time. The mortality denoted by capital D. Mortality denoted by capital D. So, here also we have taken a same species, fruit flies. Okay. So, example, the number of fruit flies in a laboratory is 40. The number of fruit flies died during a week is 4. So, death rate is the number of fruit flies died divided by number of fruit flies population in the laboratory. So, 4 divided by 40 is equals to 0.1 individuals per fruit fly per weeks. So this is how we are going to calculate the birth rate and the death rate. So once again I'll clarify the same thing, the birth rate and the or natality. So here we are discussing about the number of birth has been taken place in the population, where here in death rate or mortality, number of death which are taken place in a population among the same species, that we are going to calculate. Here the lotus plant is there. So through lotus plant one more plant will develop. That is what, through lotus, one mother plant and one the daughter plant. So that, like that, there is a new plant development is from the individual per lotus per year is 0.4. Okay, and here the individuals means when the mother plant has mother fruit fly has given birth to the daughter, that daughter, in that the death rate will be 0.1. Okay, so the number of birth in a population in a given period of time, natality denoted by B, and the number of new plants divided by number of lotus plant in a last year. The birth rate is equals to 8 divided by 20. Birth rate is 0.4 individuals per lotus per year. Whereas the number of fruit flies in a laboratory is 40. The number of fruit flies died during a week is 4. So the number of fruit flies died divided by number of fruit flies population in the laboratory is 4 divided by 40 is 0.1 individuals per fruit fly per week. This is how we are going to calculate the mortality and the natality. Population attributes, in that the one more attribute is sex ratio. So what is a sex ratio? The number of female and male per 1000 individuals. The number of female and male per 1000 individuals is called as a sex ratio. For example, in a population, 60% are male and 40% are female. Sex ratio in a population is 60% are male and 40% are female. This is what regarding the sex ratio. This is also an attribute of population. Attribute is nothing but a characteristic of a population. Next is age pyramid. Age pyramid. A model representing geometrically the proportion of different age groups in a population of any organism. Age pyramid, a model representing geometrically the proportion of different age group in a population of any organism. So, in age pyramid there are 3 types. One is expanding population or triangular in shape. Second one is stable population or bell shape. Third one is declining population or U-turn shape. So these are the 3 important types of age pyramid. In this, in graph we are seeing post-reproduction, second reproductive and pre-reproductive. So first we'll discuss about post-reproduction or a post-reproductive stage. So post-reproductive stage consists the age between 45 years to end of life. Means they cannot reproduce. They are aged peoples. Post-reproductive stage or a post-reproductive stage in this expanding population or in a age pyramid is nothing but age group is between 45 years to end of life. These are the year in a female fertility declines and they cannot bear the child. So that's what that is the post-reproductive stage. Next, reproductive stage. It is between the age group between 14 years to 45 years. In between these ages, from puberty to the 45 years, the females can undergo the process of reproduction. That stage we call it as reproductive stage. Next, pre-reproductive stage, from birth to puberty. From birth to puberty. Puberty means from birth to 0 to 14 age groups. That we indicates the pre-reproductive stage. In expanding population or triangular in shape, here the number of young individuals in the population is more. Such a population has high birth rate and low death rate. So age pyramid has a broad base. Here what we are seeing, this post-reproductive means end of life. So here we are seeing the less number and here we are seeing the broad part. So that it indicates that in this population there is a high birth rate and a low death rate. So age pyramid is having a broad base. Young individuals are more. Then it is a growing population. So it is indicating the expanding population where the death rate is less and the birth rate is more. This part is indicating that birth rate is more and death rate is less. So this population is called as an expanding population or a triangular in shape. So this diagram will get in as a competitive bit because this question is asked in NEET examination by giving this diagram. In textbook this diagram is explained, but for competitive examination papers this diagram has been, graphical representation has been given and the word triangular in shape is being used. So that here in this condition, in expanding population, the number of young individuals in a population is more, such as population has a high birth rate and low death rate. So age pyramid has a broad base. One more population is a stable population or bell-shaped. Here the population has equal birth and death rates. So the population is having equal birth and death rate. So this population we call it as a stable population. Pre-reproductive is equals to post-reproductive. There is no variation. So here the birth rate is equals to the death rate. Then it is called as a stable population. Next one is declining population. Declining population means the high rate of death than compared to the birth rate. Declining population. Now due to this pandemic period, coronavirus, because of that more death rate is seen than compared to the birth rate. So this era, this duration or this time period we considering is a declining population. So like this, the pre-reproductive is less, the birth rate is less as compared to that of the death rate. So here it is indicating the pre-reproductive individual lower than that of post-reproductive individual. Here the death rate is high than that of the birth rate. Such population we considered as a declining population. So post-reproductive is between the age 45 to till the end of life, and pre-reproductive stage the age group between birth to till 14 years and reproductive age 14 to 45 years. This is regarding the age pyramid. In that three important, very important concept regarding your NEET, that is expanding population, stable population, declining population. So in NEET examination, they may give as a twisted question, bell-shaped pyramid represent, or urn-shaped pyramid is representing, or triangular shaped pyramid is representing what population. Like that they may give option, because in NCERT textbook they given only the geometrical diagram, that is the expanding population, stable population and declining population. They didn't given the shapes of that population. So that's what you all should go through this YouTube class, and whatever concept I giving here, and go through this, and you can solve the questions which are related to this age pyramid very easily. Okay, and this question, this topic, the concept is mainly in theory examination. They will ask for 5 marks, and here when they ask for 5 marks, you have to explain like this. Describe the age pyramid. If they ask, then first you have to mention the different types of population, then you have to explain. This is how this concept is very important for your NEET as well as the theory examination.